We're into December. Playoff spots are on the line, so you need to know who to start and sit for your fantasy football team. Welcome, everybody. CBS Local Sports. Dave Richard, Jamie Eisenberg, Ryan Bass hanging out here with you. All right, let's start with that quarterback. Blake Bortles has been the hot hand. You're riding with him this week.
Absolutely. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. For the last 5 quarterbacks to play the Titans have put up 21 or more fantasy points. That's how you find numbers against Tennessee because they've been great against the run. Bortles had a bad game the last time he took on Tennessee. It was on a short week. He really didn't have his act together. I think this time around he does have his act together, and he puts up a good game. Over 21 fantasy points for Blake Bortles.
One guy who did that last week and with ease was Russell Wilson. Are you going with Russell again in Week 13?
I'm a little bit nervous about him. You know, he's done well the last 2 games. They were at home. He's typically been better at home in his career than on the road. And the Vikings' pass defense is good. You know, what they do well in terms of Seattle, using those receivers like we saw against Pittsburgh, is going to be tough with Xavier Rhodes and Terrence Newman. And Russell Wilson has not run to the same level that we've seen. So I think Mike Zimmer and his defense will come to play. They're certainly fighting for the lead in the NFC North. They'll find out if they could even take a bigger lead, depending on what happened Thursday night. So I think you can see a good situation for this defense to clamp down on Russell Wilson. He's not a top 12 quarterback.
At running back, the 2 guys you need to have your sights set on this week are the 2 in Denver, C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman, your starts of the week.
Yeah, I'm excited about them. It's a great matchup against San Diego. They struggle with opposing running backs really for the entire season so far, you know, barring what we saw last week with T.J. Yeldon and how inept that Jacksonville running game was. But with the way that the Broncos are running the ball right now, they've rushed for 170 yards each of the last 2 games, and there's been 2 times since Week 8 where both guys have gotten you double digits in fantasy points. I think this is going to be the 3rd time since that span, so it's a good opportunity to use both these guys.
Who are you sitting this week at running back, Dave?
I'm nervous about DeMarco Murray. I don't like the fact that he hasn't gotten 20 touches each of the last 2 weeks, and that rushing average, that's been ugly too.
Hey.
He's going up against the Patriots, and it's not like the Patriots' run defense is dominant by any stretch. Half of the rushing touchdowns they've allowed at home this season. I'm worried more about the game getting out of hand for Philadelphia, being forced to throw, taking DeMarco Murray out of the game plan just like he was on Thanksgiving. I don't like him even as a top 24 running back this week.
At wide receiver, the Oakland duo, they've been pretty good this year. Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. Let's focus on Crabtree. What do we do with him this week?
I think you start him, and I like him as a borderline number 2 wide receiver, definitely as a flex, certainly in PPR leagues. You're going to want to get him in your lineup. Kansas City secondary is good. They've got 1 great cornerback. That's going to be assigned to Amari Cooper. I think Cooper can beat Marcus Peters, and I think whoever's going up against Michael Crabtree is going to have a tough day because I think Oakland throws the ball well. They can't run the ball very effectively. I think Crabtree does have a nice game at home, and so does Derek Carr.
One of the big reasons that Russell Wilson had a big day in Week 12 was Doug Baldwin. This week, are you rolling with Baldwin again?
I think it's going to be tough for him. You know, the positives are no Jimmy Graham. Targets should be up, and we've seen when his targets are up, he's done a nice job. 3 games this season with at least 8 targets. He scored 15 fantasy points in standard league in 3 of those games. But this is a very, very tough secondary that he's facing with Xavier Rhodes and Terrence Newman. You saw what they were able to do last week against Julio Jones. I think they're going to be tough on Russell Wilson. It's going to be tough on Doug Baldwin. I'm sorry, Seattle. Could be a tough game for him.
Jamie, what more do we need to do to get owners to start Delanie Walker in their fantasy football league?
Start a campaign. We'll call it the Walker.
Walker.
Walk for Walker.
Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah, sure.
Please don't make it a run because I'll get tired.
I think you look at what he's done. I mean, he leads all tight ends in receptions for the season. He's been great, you know, of late, you know, especially with Kendall Wright going down. Marcus Mariota's leaned on him. He had a great game against Jacksonville on that game Thursday night a couple weeks ago, and Jacksonville's terrible against tight ends. Antonio Gates just beat them up for 2 touchdowns. So hopefully Walker finds the end zone. If that's the case, he could be the number 1 tight end for this week. Certainly got top 5 potential in this matchup.
Dave, what more do we need to do to tell owners to steer clear of Martellus Bennett?
I mean, I wouldn't run to start Martellus Bennett. I wouldn't walk to start Martellus Bennett. I would run to cut him off your fantasy team because he's been incredibly disappointing. And this is just part of a trend for him that we've seen year after year after year where he starts hot and then he fades quickly. And in Chicago, we've seen Zach Miller take a much bigger role in the offense. They're going to take away from each other this week if they're both healthy. If it turns out that Martellus Bennett doesn't play against San Francisco, then that does help Zach Miller. No matter what, there isn't a case where I'm going to look at Martellus Bennett and say he belongs in my fantasy lineup. And by the way, the 49ers haven't allowed a touchdown to a tight end in 6 straight games. Get him off your roster. You're not going to use him. Go find Richard Rodgers. Go find Jacob Tamme. Go find Cameron Brate. Those guys are better tight ends than Martellus.
In other words, anybody other than Martellus Bennett. That's who we are starting for Week 13 in the National Football League. Good luck in your run to the playoffs. Thanks for watching on CBS Local Sports.